Hey there friends, and thanks for joining me again. I've got an exciting video for you today, and it's all about how to grow really good tomatoes. Tomatoes that are disease resistant and grow really big and healthy plants that just do really well on their own without having to, have a lot of issues with bugs and things like that, or have problems with drought and other things. And also to have really yummy fruit, lots and lots of really yummy fruit. So if you want plants that are really well balanced, they're not tons of leaves and no fruit, or whatever maybe other problems you've had with your tomatoes, hopefully at least something in this video will help you to be able to figure out what you could do to make your tomatoes better. Or if you struggle with growing good tomatoes in the beginning, then maybe you might want to just try my method and do many of the things that I have done to grow the tomatoes the way I do. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to want to do when you're going to plant your tomatoes is to prepare the soil. This is very important. You want to just loosen up the soil and pull out any weeds. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is add any amendments that you're going to add. The amendments that I like to add first of all are going to be peat moss. I really like peat moss because we have clay soil here, and so this helps to loosen up the clay soil. It helps improve the drainage. The water still retains in the soil like it should. It helps improve that drainage, and then it also helps to lower the pH, because here where we live we have really alkaline soil, so it solves a lot of problems for us. So I just work a little bit of that into the soil first of all. And then the second thing I'm going to add is Epsom salt. Epsom salt is not salt, it's actually magnesium sulfate. And it has basically magnesium and sulfur, and these two things working together do a lot of things for the plants actually. They help increase the vigor of the plants. They make them grow really quickly and really well. And then it also makes other nutrients that you have in the soil available to the plants. Sometimes it's not that we don't have the nutrients in the soil, we just need to make them available, and so this will help with that. It also helps to add a sweet taste to the fruit, so if you want really tasty tomatoes, this is an inexpensive way to make that happen. It's really inexpensive, and most of the garden plants that we plant actually benefit from having them added. So it's, buy a bag and you can use it all over your garden on almost every one of your plants, and it improves a lot of them. So I highly recommend it. So we're looking for something about a tablespoon per plant in our garden bed here. But don't add Epsom salt if you add lime, because it's going to already have many of the nutrients that the Epsom salt has in it. So if you add lime, you can skip this one. And so the next thing I add is azomite. Azomite is basically like a rock dust. It has lots and lots of little trace minerals and things. This step is totally optional. It just makes the plants a little bit healthier, or a lot healthier, and it also helps to keep the fruit a little bit healthier too. And then the next thing I add is compost. Compost is such a huge cure-all. It helps all types of soil. It helps improve drainage if you don't have drainage that's good enough. It helps to improve drainage if your soil drains too fast. It adds lots of nutrients to the plants and things like that. It just helps a lot of things, and so working a good amount of compost into the soil is definitely helpful also. So I add about 2 handfuls per plant when I'm working it into the soil, preparing it. And then the next thing I add, the last thing I add to the soil so far when I'm preparing the soil is this tomato tone fertilizer. I really like this fertilizer. It actually has a lot of different things that tomatoes specifically need in it. So it has not only the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, for the leafy green growth, fruit and flowers, good root development. It also has things like calcium in it, with which tomatoes often lack. Like if you've ever had tomatoes that have blossom end rot, like they're on the plant, from their vine, and then the tomato, the bottom end of it where that flower was, if you ever have that part of it rot or look brown and yucky, it's common in tomatoes, but it's actually a calcium deficiency. And so this is a good fertilizer, I think, because it has lots of different things, like I said, that the tomatoes need. It has that calcium in it. And it also has microbes in it. Unlike almost any other fertilizer I've ever seen, it has like live and active microbes that are going to help feed the soil. So it's really a good fertilizer. If you prefer not to use this fertilizer, if you would prefer to use another one, while it's organic, so it's going to be good for the environment, both when it was manufactured and also when we use it. But if you have another one that you would prefer to use, I would recommend taking the one that you're going to use and then adding with it something like rock phosphate or bone meal, because both of those have phosphorus in them, and phosphorus is important for flower development. So if you've ever had plants that grew big and green and bushy, but you didn't really get a lot of fruit off of them, it's probably because they're not getting enough phosphorus. So I would highly recommend, in order to make that, whatever fertilizer you intend to use, into a better one that's suited for tomatoes specifically, is just to add one of those two, bone meal or rock phosphate, to it in order to make it increase flower production and more fruit. So both of those are really good. And also phosphorus helps increase calcium availability. So if your soil has lots of calcium in it, but then you still get blossom end rot, it could be because there's not enough phosphorus in the soil to help make that calcium available. So the two of those things work together really well. And so with that, those are all the things that I add to the soil. I know it kind of sounds like a lot, but it's really not that bad. And not a lot of them are all that expensive. So I've already done that here. I've loosened the soil, added all of the amendments and things like that. And so the next thing we're ready to do is to actually plant our tomato plant. And there are two different ways that you can do this. A lot of people prefer to dig a big, deep hole and to plant them almost all the way to the top. Some people prefer to plant them on their side. Well, which of these two methods are better? I honestly think it really depends on what kind of soil you have. If you have soil that's sandy, or loamy, where it holds onto the moisture well, or if it, your soil drains really well, then you could probably do the nice deep hole method, because all these roots that are at the bottom right now are going to be at the bottom of the hole once you dig your big hole and you put your tomato plant down in here. So they really need this portion of the plant to get water once you first plant it. The problem is, if you don't have well-draining soil like we have here, like I mentioned earlier, we have clay soil. If you bury your plant that deep, it might have a big time problem trying to get all that water to the bottom. So like you plant your tomato really deep, and then you water the plant, and then it only gets down to, say, here. Well, then your plant struggles and dies because the water didn't reach down to where the root ball is. The cool thing about tomato plants is when you plant them deeper or on their side, they actually grow roots along their stem. And if you look at this one, hopefully you can see right there how it gets these little buds and things like that. Those are actually the plant rearing to grow roots right on its stem. So because we have clay soil, I prefer to use what they call the healing method, healing it up, or what I prefer to call the trench method, which is, like I said, the second version, which is actually on its side. So you just kind of dig a big hole, kind of on its side, like I said. It's kind of why I call it the trench method, is because it's kind of like a long, deep hole rather than a big, long hole. If you're not sure which of these two methods you want to use, then you may just want to use the trench method because it's easier. You don't have to dig a big hole. But if you've had good success with the method where you put it big and deep, that's fine too. Feel free to plant it either way, depending on what kind of soil you have. The next thing you're going to want to do is pull off a few of these leaves. If you put them under the ground, they're just going to rot anyway, which can cause other soil problems and issues. So we're going to put it on its side. Make this a little deeper right here. There we go. Now before I fill it over, I actually have a couple more things I'm going to add to the soil. There we go. So the second two things I'm going to add to the soil in the hole itself, because all the other things that I've mentioned so far I added to the soil when I was preparing this garden bed. These two things are things I'm going to add to the hole. It's going to be some more crushed up calcium, and that's just because we have problems with calcium in our soil around here. So I need to add a little bit extra in order to really ensure that we don't end up with that blossom end rot. So I add that to the hole, a little more. Something of like, 2 or 3 eggs worth. And then the last thing I'm going to add to this hole is actually aspirin, which has the chemical name acetyl salicylic acid. And this actually in laboratory tests has proven to help plants to have better disease resistance and better heat and drought and cold stress capabilities of handling those types of things. So when the laboratory tests were carried out, they basically said that when the plants had this added to them, when bugs and other things, started setting in like they're going to in every garden always, or it was really hot and there was a lot of heat, and other things that the tomatoes don't normally have to deal with, when they were in the greenhouse. This helps them to be able to deal with that type of stress. So we're looking for about 1 pill per plant here, but mine's a low dose, so I've added 2. And then I'm going to mix it in just a little bit. Mix in some of that calcium that I added with the eggshells. Mix it in a little bit and then fill in around the plant with soil, leaving just this very top here sticking out. One thing I like to do when I'm planting them is to make like a little, I don't know what to call it, but just like this little rim around the outside edge of the plant. And that makes it so when we go to water it, the water stays right in here where the plant was planted. And as the season wears on, this is actually going to wear itself flat, but that's going to be okay because by then the roots will have spread, and so it will be okay for it to be flat, and then the water will go everywhere. But while it's just the stem and then the root ball, of course, down here, it'll keep the water where it needs to be for this young plant. There you go. That's it. That's everything. We've added everything we needed to the soil, and we've planted it the way that it needs to be planted. And so when you do this method, it makes it really easy to maintain also. Just water it. You want to put a cage over it, and definitely not one of those flimsy ones, because this plant is going to grow to be huge. It's going to be like the Incredible Hulk or like Godzilla or something. It's just going to destroy every flimsy cage in its path. So put a nice, strong, and sturdy cage on top of this thing, and then it's just going to grow up to be huge and happy and disease resistant and able to handle stress from the heat and have really high amounts of really delicious fruit and everything because of all this that we've added. So other regular maintenance is going to need is obviously just regular watering. They definitely benefit from being mulched, so if you can put some mulch on this area where you've planted them, that's going to help retain the moisture, which is definitely going to help also. And then just basic maintenance throughout the summer. They benefit from having, say, another tablespoon or so added to the hole where the area where the roots are. Maybe once a month you can add another tablespoon of that just to feed them. Or you can also do a foliar feeding where you mix up, say, a tablespoon or so per gallon of water, and then make fish fertilizer according to whatever the package directions is. I mix those two together, the fish fertilizer with the Epsom salt in the water, of course. Mix that together, and then I'll spray it on the leaves of the plants. This really helps them in the summertime when it's hot, because just like us, we don't want to make and eat really heavy meals and heavy foods during the summertime. The plants are the same way. They don't want heavy meals either. So when we want to feed them with what they need, just a nice light, foliar feeding of something that's easy to absorb really helps them a lot. So with that, I think you're going to be really happy with the results. Really pleased with how big your plants grow and how much fruit and how good your tomatoes are going to taste. So I really hope you found this video helpful, and we'll see you next time. I'm Frugal Green Girl. Thanks for watching.